Is the NBA's business flying high at playoff time, or is the league hobbling despite the highlights?
We'll probably have about 10 teams losing money.
We look at stern realities with Scott Soshnick. Live from New York, it's Eli Manning.
I'm hosting SNL. Almost.
Paul Sweeney of Bloomberg Industries explains why sports is a star performer in the media marketplace. Plus, meet the chief marketer for the U.S. Olympic brand and meet an NFL player who's building his own brand in the social space.
It's about who is really following you and who you're following. People of influence, people that you want to be connected with.
Follow us right now on Sportfolio. Hello, I'm Rick Horrow, and welcome to Sportfolio, Bloomberg's weekly inside look at the business of sports. London 2012 is coming like a freight train, and Lisa Baird's determined to get us all on board. The CMO of the USOC shares her strategy. And Green Bay Packer Greg Jennings has over 200,000 Twitter followers. If you wonder why athletes seek the social media spotlight, he's got it all thought out. But let's start with the NBA. David Stern deserves to crow about the quality of postseason basketball, with great matchups shaping up in both conference finals. But there's bad news bubbling below the surface, with the Players Association facing internal turmoil and a federal investigation. And ugly behavior casts a pall on the playoffs, from disturbing on-court incidents to unwise post-game punches. David Stern has never seen a glass that wasn't half full. So it's not surprising that he gave upbeat answers to Al Hunt's tough questions on this week's Political Capital. On the subject of punishment for cheap shots and flagrant fouls, the commissioner insisted he did not go easy on Meta World Peace.
Actually, I think the recent incident demonstrates how much we have squeezed violence out of the NBA. When we deal with errant acts, in the case of the gentleman formerly known as Ron Artest, he was a repeat offender, and we dealt harshly, I think, with a 7-game suspension.
Last year, over half your teams lost money. With the new contract and this year, do you have any estimate yet of how many teams will be in the black this year?
This year, we'll probably have about 10 teams losing money, and next year, I hope that the number will be down to under 5. And then after that, I would expect that all of our teams will have the opportunity to make money.
Mr. Commissioner, I know you run the NBA. You are not responsible for what happens with the Players Union, but there now is a federal investigation of the Players Union. Does that have the potential to hurt all of professional basketball?
I don't think so. I'm a lawyer by trade, and I think that the appropriate thing to do is to accord people the benefit of the doubt and see what due process ultimately yields. If I had a nickel for every federal investigation that went no place, and throw in some state ones as well, I could afford to move to Washington.
David Stern, as always, acting unruffled, but he admitted to Al Hunt that the situation has distracted the Players Association from focusing on other important league business. Joining us now to talk hoops is Bloomberg's Scott Soshnick. Hey, Scott, what's going on with the Players Association? How might it affect the league as a business?
Well, right about now, you've got their outside counsel compiling all the documents that the U.S. Attorney has requested. That has not been completed yet. When they do put all that together, it'll be turned over, and then they will wait for word of the investigation to be complete. That's where we stand right now. Billy Hunter has recused himself from the process, but it has certainly been a distraction. Maybe one or two of the lawyers over there are actually working on league business, which was a refreshing change for them. They are busy with this investigation. It has really taken up a lot of their time, energy, focus, concentration, and as David Stern said, a lot of the business isn't getting done because this is just acting as one major roadblock.
Well, let's talk about the other side of the basketball economy, the owners. Now, the commissioner said 10 teams are in the red this year, and he expects that number to drop with the new labor deal. But does that mean the league's in good financial health going forward?
Well, it seems to be in good financial health because the refrain we heard the entire lockout was every team should have the ability to make money and the ability to compete for a championship. We were talking about aggregate losses of about $300 million a year. But what the NBA never told us was how much built into that number was poor management. they look to extract all of it in the labor deal. So simply by pushing the shared revenue from 57% to the players to the 50% number where we are now, that adds about $10 million to the bottom line of each and every team. Moving forward, there are further restrictions as the cap holds take place, as the luxury tax gets a little tighter and squeezes the higher spending teams. Revenue sharing is increased. So if you don't make money 2, 3, 4 years from now as an NBA owner, you probably have to look within to cite some reasons rather than just the collective bargaining agreement doesn't allow me or give me a chance to make money.
Well, you talk about markets, and one market that has some trouble on and off the court, Sacramento, arena deal, looks like it falls apart. What happens to the Kings?
Well, haven't we heard this a million times before? What happens to the Kings depends on what the Maloof family chooses to do. They are saying that they want to remain in Sacramento. However, their actions seem to suggest otherwise. What people in the league are wondering are, one, do the Maloofs have enough money to really be NBA owners? And two, is there some sort of fracture within the family with George Maloof, who is historically the businessman of the group, looking to sell the franchise and recapitalize the family, but Joe and Gavin, who have run the team, sort of wrap their identity around being the owners of the Kings, looking to hold on to the franchise. But right now, the plan that has gone up in smoke called for about $75 million contribution from the family, $200+ million from the private sector, and public money as well. So if that doesn't fly, you have to wonder just how far over does the taxpayer have to bend to keep this franchise in place.
Well, finally, Scott, it's been a long time since we talked about competition from the NHL, but the hockey playoffs, absolutely dynamite. And last week, an NHL game beat an NBA game head-to-head in the TV ratings for the first time since the 2005 lockout. You think this could be a concern for the NBA?
I don't think they look at other leagues as being concerns. They have to worry about their own business because, as we know in the NBA, it's a second half, it's a playoff push. As the NBA gets toward its finals, if they can get marquee stars like a LeBron James in Miami against a Kobe Bryant, they'll do just fine. But the game that you're referencing, the NBA, was San Antonio, not historically one of the bigger teams, against Utah. I mean, these are just small markets, and I believe the Spurs years ago, while in the finals, despite Tim Duncan and Tony Parker, they posted the lowest rated finals in history. They just don't play a brand of basketball that gets much publicity or seems to draw fans. So look at the teams and the matchups. If you can get a long series with big stars involved, the NBA will do just fine up against any league.
Scott Soshnick covers the NBA for Bloomberg. Scott, thanks for joining us.
You got it, Rick.
Last weekend, Eli Manning hosted Saturday Night Live, following Joe Montana, Tom Brady, and Big Brother Peyton across that line that divides sports and entertainment. But seeing how entertainment companies are pouring money into sports programming, is there really a line anymore? Coming up, what sports means to the bottom line of the biggest brands in media, with expert analysis from Paul Sweeney of Bloomberg Industries. That's straight ahead on Sportfolio. Eli Manning's performance as host of NBC's Saturday Night Live was only a mild success by the numbers. A 5.2 rating, and well short of the viewers who tuned in to see Big Brother Peyton Manning host the show in 2007. Of course, exactly 90 days earlier, Eli Manning was the main attraction in NBC's telecast of the Super Bowl, only the most watched program of all time. Ever since Jack Benny went toe-to-toe with Milton Berle, media empires have been built on star power. But in recent years, sports has become even more rock-solid foundation for network profits. Joining us to analyze the impact of sports in the media sector, Paul Sweeney of Bloomberg Industries. Hey, Paul, the value of sports programming never been higher. What's really behind that boom?
What's driving the boom in sports programming is simply ratings. Year in and year out, some of the highest rated programs on television, both broadcast and cable, is sports programming, primarily the Super Bowl and the NFL. But sports programming across the board consistently drives ratings for the networks.
Disney, News Corp, the big behemoths in this media space, how do their numbers and revenues break down?
Well, right. Both of those companies are the leaders in sports programming. For Disney, of course, we have to talk about ESPN. ESPN revenue was over $7 billion last year. That represents over half of the revenue for Disney's cable network business. Fox is right behind them. The Fox Sports business is a little over $2.5 billion in revenue. That's almost a third of the total revenue for Fox's cable network business. So for both of those companies, it's a big part of their business, but Disney is the clear leader with ESPN.
Classic seller's market that defies traditional analysis, so you really can't tell. But Disney 1, News Corp 2 in terms of revenue from sports. How about Comcast and NBC, who combined their sports assets when they merged in 2010?
Right. Comcast, NBC, Universal, expects to be a bigger player in the sports business. Comcast historically relied primarily on some of its regional sports networks and some niche sports networks such as the Golf Channel. NBC, of course, has the NBC network and their business with the Olympics, which has been a core part of their sports programming. So putting those two businesses together, Comcast expects to be a bigger player in sports and perhaps even compete somewhat against the ESPNs of the world.
What about cable in this context? Is it the key battleground here? Monday Night Football, BCS Championship, they're now on cable. It would have been unthinkable years ago, don't you think?
You're exactly right. And what's driving the sports programming to cable is simply that cable is a better economic model. Cable networks are able to afford sports because they have two revenue streams. They have not only advertising revenue, but they also have affiliate fees. And these affiliate fees are a means by which these cable networks can pass along to consumers the ever-increasing cost of programming.
Well, subscriber fees are a windfall for the networks, but they do raise the price for consumers. Can the demand for sports keep up with the cost?
It remains to be seen. There's a lot of people in the marketplace today that feel like sports programming rights are really pushing up against the upper limit, and that consumers, in fact, are going to start pushing back on some of the higher cable bills that they're paying and subscriber bills they're paying for their satellite businesses. Most of those subscriber and fee increases are driven by sports programming. So a lot of consumers are saying that enough is enough. Our cable bills are high enough, and perhaps we don't want to pay for all this sports.
Well, the old reliable obviously always has been, maybe always will be, advertising. How strong is the advertising market for sports programming?
The advertising market for sports programming remains very strong. We see it year after year with ever-increasing prices for the Super Bowl and for some other marquee events such as NCAA basketball. Year in and year out, we see advertising for the networks that carry that type of programming, up 10 to 20% every year, which is well above what the general market is growing.
And the mother of all marquee events may be the Olympics. You mentioned those Olympics as maybe having a chance to boost NBC Comcast into Fox's territory as number 2, or in revenues, or is the gap really too great?
It's a pretty big gap at the moment, but I think the way Comcast views the Olympics right now is it is a core piece of sports programming for the Comcast NBCU sports business. It's something upon which they can build other sports properties, other cable networks. But right now, it is a great business for them, but they have a long way to go to catch Fox and certainly ESPN.
Paul Sweeney, Bloomberg Industries, great info. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Still ahead, I'll sit down with a football player who's expressing his social conscience through social media, and with the U.S. Olympic Committee's marketing chief, which sets up our sportfolio stumper. What was the highest rated telecast of an Olympic event? One evening of programming of all time. We'll give you the answer when we come back on Sportfolio. And here's the answer to our Sportfolio stumper. The highest rated telecast of an Olympic event? Ladies figure skating at Lillehammer in 1994. Nancy Kerrigan versus Tanya Harding following the famous tire iron incident. Athletes who tweet often draw attention when they say something controversial. But some use social media to send carefully crafted messages about who they are, how they do business, and how they see the world. Green Bay Packers wideout Greg Jennings is active on Facebook and Twitter and ties it in with active community involvement. The connection grew global when he joined other NFL players on a humanitarian trip to Africa this spring.
It's with a group of guys that pretty much have the same mindset. They want to be exceptional leaders. They want to have a positive, lasting influence on others. And at the end of the day, it's not just to say, I did this, or look at me, it's for real, it's genuine. I'm really excited to go and change lives. That's what it's all about.
You were born in '83, and how does a kid from Kalamazoo connect then, let's say with a Barry Sanders, for example? What's the difference today, and how does social media change a kid's ability to connect with his stars?
It gives you that inside track, whereas when I was growing up, there was no connection unless you physically met a person. You know, cell phones weren't in at the time, so you had no tie to developing a relationship unless you were face-to-face with someone. And so now what the social media has done, it's allowed fans to feel like they're a part of and they're attached to some of their favorite players or celebrities or whatever the case may be. Initially, it was uncomfortable for myself to put myself out there, my family out there, and the things that we were engaging in. But for the brand and for what we're trying to do with the foundation, it's very important to let people know.
Well, anybody that has a ability to text now, even an old dude like me, we call ourselves tech savvy, but you've really taken it to the next level and you let it work for you.
For me, it was a branding deal. It was a way I saw to kind of project and promote what it is I was doing and what the foundation was doing.
And you're pretty entrepreneurial, and you know that it would be important to leverage your sponsors into social media experiences. How do you do that?
Exactly. You use it to your advantage, number one. And the way you use it to your advantage is you know what it is you want to do, you aspire to do. For myself, it's acting, it's different things. I'm a family man, so I put that out there, and you never know who's following you. A lot of people think it's about how many followers you have, but it's really not. It's about who's really following you and who you're following. People of influence, people that you want to be connected with. And so when you tweet something, you're keeping in mind and bearing in mind that the people that you want to see this are going to view this at some point. So you never know what kind of impact that may have long term, and you hope that it catches the right person at the right time and they reach out and understand that, oh, this is a guy I want to get to know, this is a guy I want to possibly work with in the future, and that's how a relationship can bloom.
So how do you segue now, where you're still a vibrant, contributing wide receiver for the Packers, into life after football? You doing a little more off-field, and is there a conscious effort to kind of move things around a little bit?
It's important for me to let people know that I'm serious about what I'm trying to pursue. It isn't just I'm using it as a platform right now to just develop my own personal brand and that's it, and I don't need it for anything long term, because I do. Those relationships are everything. The people you network with, you never know the influence that you can have on them and they'll have on you, and you never know, again, what something can blossom into.
Greg Jennings has a favorite hashtag, be great. He'll be a free agent following the 2012 season and should be in great position for a great payday. Plenty left on Sportfolio, a conversation with the marketing mind behind Team USA at the 2012 Olympics. Get Sportfolio wherever you go on the Bloomberg TV Plus app for iPad. The baseball that rolled through Bill Buckner's legs in Game 6 of the 1986 World Series has a new owner. It was sold at auction last week for $418,000. Now on the block, a Yankees cap worn in games by Babe Ruth and David Wells. Wells bought it in 1997 and told Bloomberg's Bottom Line why he decided to sell it.
Some guy came into spring training and offered me like $230,000 for my hat, just like that. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, wow. I said, well, let me talk to my wife and see if she wants to do it. So I called my buddy and I asked him, what's this hat worth? And he goes, a lot of money. I said, well, how much is a lot? And he goes, quite a bit, $300,000-400,000. And I'm like, wow.
When the Beijing Olympics opened on August 8, 2008, Twitter had just reached a milestone, 2 million users. YouTube had launched its first international version just a year earlier. And the global marketing landscape certainly has changed for this Olympiad, and so has the value equation for sponsors. Nobody knows that better than the Chief Marketing Officer of the U.S. Olympic Committee, Lisa Baird.
You know, during the 17 days of the Games, you have America glued to not only the television set now, but their smartphone, their computer, to hear the stories of the athletes, to watch the coverage, to engage in the stories. And our partners, not only our top global sponsors, but our domestic sponsors, realize the value of that. It's a great three-way relationship between us, NBC, and our sponsors in how creative we can be about the marketing programs. And certainly for London, you're going to see some exciting new advertising and marketing by our sponsors.
It's a huge freight to pay to be an Olympic top sponsor. Are sponsors getting their money's worth today more than ever, and how do you ensure that happens in the future?
The thing I like to say that's different about the USOC and the Olympics in general versus another property is everything we do is custom. There's really no menu to pick, let me do this, this, and this. We really have to work harder, I think, than some of our colleagues in other properties to say, what are your marketing objectives? What are your business objectives? And let's build something custom that fits you. The interesting thing, if you look at our roster, is we have consumer packaged goods companies like the Coca-Cola Company and now most recently Procter & Gamble. We have B2B companies. We have companies that are using the Olympic Games as a way to get their large employee bases excited. So we really have to be more creative and work a little bit harder to get that value for them.
And are we still at an incredible competitive disadvantage relative to the old Eastern Bloc pay for play? I know we're proud of the amateur athletes who play for pride, but that puts us behind the eight ball a little bit in some contexts, doesn't it?
You know, the fact and the reality is that most countries fund their sport ministries and their Olympic programs through government spending. So we have to work harder at the U.S. Olympic Committee. I have to work harder to get the sponsorships, to make sure that there's value there. Because that number that governments and other countries is going up. There's no doubt about it. People are spending more money to put more competitive teams. So it really is a challenge for us to keep up when we don't have government spending. So again, getting sponsors, broadcast partners, and every Americans to say, the only way that we can have a team that can represent our nation out there is through you. That's the message we have to get across.
Next time on the program, we'll hear from Olympic gymnast Shawn Johnson, as well as corporate sponsors. What's driving dollars to Team USA and its partners? Going for gold next week on Sportfolio. That'll do it for our show this week. Many thanks to Greg Jennings, Lisa Baird, Paul Sweeney, and Scott Soshnick for joining us. And thank you for watching. Visit our webpage at Bloomberg.com for more Sportfolio video and all of our past episodes. I'm Rick Horrow. See you next time.